For a number of years, I've been studying Prakritic Chikitsa, otherwise known as nature cure or naturopathy, as a form of alternative public health in contemporary India. My interest is in the cultural logic of a radical politics of the body that is reflected in a large number of nature cure institutions. All of these institutions are inspired by Gandhi's experiments with truth and seek to operationalize his philosophy of political action by means of very specific technologies of therapy using earth, air, sunlight, and water. Especially in contemporary India, where the diseases of civilization, as my colleagues in medical anthropology call them, haunt the work of capitalist progress and neoliberal development. The use of enemas, steam baths, raw foods, mud baths, and modern yoga define a distinctive politics of health. Based on a reading of Gandhi's collected works, I've made the argument that one cannot understand his activism in terms of psychology or the idealism of cultural politics, but only in terms of a kind of moral materialism that encompasses the body, the mind, and the soul. I have explored the larger issues of moral materialism in a recent book, which, as you can see, has absolutely nothing to do with Gandhi's political method. Nevertheless, the work that I have been doing for several years on a range of different embodied practices, including yoga, Ayurveda, physical fitness, and problems of weakness, has afforded an opportunity to re-examine the nature of Gandhi's conception of truth and power in relation to his body and the body politic. Although the term Swaraj is often translated as self-rule and clearly factors into the politics of the nationalist movement in programmatic ways, the term itself was used by Gandhi to mean a politics of self-control based on the bio-moral principles of nature cure. Now, since there are numerous references to nature cure in his autobiography and a didactic engagement with its underlying principles in Hind Swaraj, it is remarkable that Gandhi's abiding concern with Prakritic Chikitsa, here he's using a compress on his head, has received very little scholarly attention. This may well be because mud baths, hip baths, and enemas do not fit as easily into the rhetoric of saintliness as do fasting, celibacy, and vegetarianism. Realizing this, the Mahatma often referred to himself, as many others did, a faddist quack. But his sense of humor belies the seriousness with which he engaged in regimens of treatment designed to promote health and establish a kind of symmetry among biology, ecology, and the ontology of truth. He wrote numerous articles, countless letters, and several books on nature cure, in particular a short pamphlet called Key to Health. Now, it is important to note that Gandhi's interest in nature cure began while he was studying law in London, at which point he was introduced to Henry Salt's books, one on vegetarianism and the other on animal rights. Both books articulate an ecological philosophy of nonviolent moral symmetry. Salt developed his ideas, at least in part, within the context of a global health reform movement that reshaped ideas about health and fitness from about the late 1880s to the 1930s. After his experiments with vegetarianism, Gandhi read two books that came to define his attitude toward personal and later public health. One was by Louis Cunet, The New Science of Healing, and the other by Return to Nature by Adolphe Just. In slightly different ways, both Cunet and Just were heavily influenced by a German countercultural movement focused on living in harmony with nature by abjuring material things such as clothes, shoes, soft beds, and refined food, and encouraging people to return to a healthy state of nature. Adolphe Just, in particular, was a Wandervogler in the tradition advocating nudism, sunbathing, sleeping on the ground in fresh air, among a number of other very specific kinds of treatment, using only natural elements. In the late 1880s, Cunet and Just adapted early 19th century therapeutic techniques invented in Bavaria and Bohemia by advocates of hydrotherapy. Innovators like Father Sebastian Gnip used water from streams and rivers in the forms of showers and baths and compresses to treat everything from broken bones to typhoid fever and tuberculosis. As an industrialist, entrepreneur, Cunet helped turn hydrotherapy into nature cure by integrating a range of techniques involving the use of earth, light, air, to supplement the primary use of water in the treatment of all diseases. As a factory owner, Cunet also developed techniques that might be characterized as industrial strength nature cure therapy, and he regularized these in high-tech sanatoriums. Significantly, Just and Kuhn, among others, had no difficulty in reconciling the purity of natural elements with turn-of-the-century science and technology. What they were adamantly critical of was not modernity as such, but the thoughtless passivity with which most people consumed modernity and put artificial things into and onto their bodies, most especially medicine. If there's one thing that nature cure came to stand for, it was the categorical rejection of the philosophy, theory, and methods of turn-of-the-century medicine, as medicine in this period changed dramatically with the discovery of germs and infection. To challenge biomedicine, Cunet proposed a new science of healing based on three simple but radical principles. All diseases are, in fact, symptoms of toxicity, as toxins accumulate in the body as a result of bad living habits and eating habits. 2, sickness should be understood as a positive sign of holistic natural recovery and recuperation, rather than as a self-contained problem. Symptoms are a sign of recovery, not an indication of disease. And 3, the body can heal itself by purging toxins with the aid of therapy using air, light, water, and earth. Now, whereas Cunet and all European advocates of nature cure viewed biomedicine as problematic and dangerous on the level of theory and practice and advocated various treatment programs to restore health, Gandhi embraced this but extended the critique into the domain of moral philosophy. In this regard, it is important to keep in mind the way in which germ theory and immunization radically changed people's understanding of the body. This is a point Dipankar made earlier, relative to society and social institutions, especially in relation to public health programs involving sanitation and vaccination. The influenza epidemic of 1918 probably helped to crystallize these ideas. What Gandhi came to appreciate was the body's changing moral status in a context where the problem of good and evil was displaced to a molecular level. With a shift from the holistic molar body of the early 18th century humors to one that was plagued by the chronic risk of infection by alien germs, the violence of conflict became invisible and pervasive, intimate and visceral, and yet deeply impersonal and profoundly alienating. Various articulations of power take advantage of this, in particular the impressive materialism on the bodies of colonized subjects. Gandhi's experiments were, I believe, directly concerned with the status of the body in a context of modernity where morality was inherently political and where the politics of action was also a philosophy and physiology of being. For example, he said that self-rule is impossible without self-control of celibacy, that racist attitudes cannot be changed without changing what people eat, that the solution to sectarian strife involves collective purification by means of fasting. In all this, one can see how Gandhi understood imperialism, racism, and religious intolerance as symptoms of a more fundamental problem: people's alienation from the means of their bodies' purification, consumption, and elimination, and the importance of Swaraj as a kind of politics that directly involved the body, the environment, and bodily functions. It is in light of this, I think, that one must read Gandhi's political manifesto, Hind Swaraj. Now, to read this in terms of a politics of the body based on nature cure is not at all so much of a radical deviation from the way in which it has been interpreted, so much as a way to reconcile the tract's didactic rhetoric with the principles of revolutionary action. Now, before taking into consideration what some of the proto-Gandhians were doing while Gandhi himself was reading Cunet and Just in South Africa, I would like to further explain the nature of Gandhi's biomoral philosophy. As I'm sure everybody is aware, he read the Bhagavad Gita much more thoroughly than he read the New Science of Healing and Return to Nature. But in doing so, he did not just come to a unique interpretation of Karma Yoga and absolute faith in God. He came to an understanding of a profound link between philosophy and everyday life, between the spirit and the material world. Among other things, the Gita makes it perfectly clear that sex and violence are enmeshed illusions of the ego's alienation from the soul. But this is but a mechanical articulation of a much more encompassing philosophy of spiritual materialism that is articulated in Samkhya philosophy and can be used to give the Gita a more unambiguously dualist interpretation than might otherwise be the case, one that is perhaps more relevant to the context of colonial and post-colonial modernity than to the battlefields of an earlier age. In any case, Gandhi hitched himself to the chariot of this logic. By saying that his ideas about nature cure and health can be understood in terms of Samkhya, I do not want to suggest that Gandhi was in any sense knowledgeable or even particularly interested in the details of second century Shastric exegesis and reasoning, or even aware of the work being produced by scholars such as Surendranath Dasgupta in the 20s and 30s. Gandhi's interpretation was more akin to an inspirational cosmopolitan gestalt than to the pure reason of Gyan or the gnosis of Vigyan. He was a pragmatist, not a scholar. Nevertheless, Gandhi wrote extensively about Samkhya as it relates to key to health, and I won't go into this in detail in the interests of time, but I'll shift instead to just note that it is interesting to see in the key to health how Gandhi moves from nakedness in the mode of Adolf Just's admonition to Wandervogelers to a kind of down-to-earth unity with the infinite based on an intuitive sense in which Samkhya postulates a sliding scale of gross to subtle elements in the cosmic ecology of life. Here, the body can be transformed into a subtle manifestation of ether as Akash, what is sometimes called the infinite vacuum of space, that material element of Prakriti that almost perfectly reflects the character of Purush and Paramatma, the great soul of the universe. Now, time and space do not permit an elaboration here of the therapeutic procedures for promoting health and metaphysical fitness. Gandhi essentially modified and elaborated on one of the key technologies used by Louis Cunet, the sitting hip bath, to purge toxins and replace them with the cosmic nature of ethereal Akash, as this promoted both efficient digestion and self-control and a kind of pervasive equanimity that is extended from the body to society and to the environment. Therefore, I would like to conclude by following the distinctive logic of this conceptualization of public health, one that is significantly different from the impersonal, disarticulated, purely demographic logic of public health as an arm of the state. Research that I'm currently doing is focused on a broad network of like-minded men and a few women who came to the same conclusion as Gandhi did, both somewhat before and at the same time as the Mahatma was experimenting with truth. It's quite remarkable in the context of medical history to see how this was being done. In light of this, it is not surprising but important to remember that nature cure came to define the biomoral basis for a politics of the body that engaged the imperative of colonial medicine, most especially immunization, sanitation, and water purification programs. Very soon after Louis Cunet's New Science of Healing was translated into Hindi and Telugu around the turn of the century, self-trained practitioners of nature cure began promoting hydrotherapy, mud baths, and other forms of treatment all over the country. These are men such as Krishan Swarup Shrotriya, who translated Cunet into Hindi and Urdu at the turn of the century, and then retired from his work as a lawyer in Moradabad to establish the first nature cure sanatorium in India in the small town of Bijnor. We can see Manibhai Desai and Vinoba Bhave, who established Urli Kanchan to integrate nature cure with Gandhian principles of rural development and village reconstruction. Gopchar is a dynamic institution based on the use of early 20th century technology, attracting patients from Mumbai, Gujarat, Pune, and the Gulf. Vital Das Modi, a close associate of Gandhi's who published 25 books and established Arogya Mandir in Gorakhpur in the 1940s. Thank you. Be almost done. Arogya Mandir is a dynamic institution, a resolutely Gandhian institution that draws on patients from Lucknow, Patna, Allahabad, and Nepal. We can see it in Dr. S.J. Singh, who took his training in England and then returned to establish the sanatorium in Lucknow. He has published over 20 books and pamphlets, including a comprehensive history of nature cure extending from the Greeks to Gandhi. And as he saw it, it was Asclepius and Shiv rather than Dionysus and Shiv. But we're on the same page, I think. We can see it in C.A. Menon, who founded Akhil Bharatiya Prakritic Chikitsa Parishad, under the auspices of which Dr. R.M. Nair runs the Bapu Nature Cure Hospital and Yoga Ashram in Patparganj, Delhi. BNCHY provides subsidized treatment to government employees and coordinates health education camps for companies, schools, and institutions. Gulranjan Mukherjee, an early Bengali advocate who translated many books from English into Hindi, published a large number of volumes based on his interpretation of hydrotherapy and established a nature cure center in Calcutta in the 30s. We can see it in V.M. Kulkarni, a well-known practitioner in Mumbai, who gave a theosophical interpretation to Louis Cunet's New Science of Healing in his book on scientific hydrotherapy, and Pranjivan Mehta, who published a book on solar therapy called Elements of Light Therapy. He helped establish and run the Jamnagar Solarium in 1934, one of 3 in the world designed by the Frenchman named Jean Seidman, who specialized in heliotherapy. And there are numerous others published in many books. There's a fascinating collection, many of which can be found in the wonderful library at Nisargopchar. But lest this be understood as arcanum ad infinitum, just a bunch of faddist quacks living in the figment of their imagination, I will end by making what may sound like an absurd claim. I'll end by simply making the absurd claim that modern yoga, which is in fact something that has come to be thought of as an icon of ancient Indian civilization, came into being in the 1920s through explicit dialogue with nature cure, as nature cure conceptualized pran as the basis for a particular kind of therapy. And so when we look at the performance of yoga in modern India as a form of alternative public health, what we're seeing is a complex dialogue which began much before Cunet and Juste and Gandhi, but this was a conceptualization of the body arguing against biomedicine as a particular form of colonial domination. Thank you.